Truman, our own personal injury lawyer, our personal injury lawyer. You can count on the Colonel, and he is in the house to answer legal questions from you. So dial that telephone number right now, 276-2118, please, and ask all the questions that you need to know the answers to. Tori Murden McClure is very concerned about Cheerios or Fruit Loops versus Cerealos. Can any personal injury law be applied to that situation?
Okay, I think that's outside of my area of practice.
Outside of your practice area.
All right, well, we've been having some crazy weather outside. I'm sure there might be some drivers that aren't driving appropriately, and also hail damage. I noticed a few little bumps on my car. Is that something I can do something about?
Is that a personal injury claim?
No, it's not.
Did she get hit on the head?
I was not
with the
injured.
hail?
No, I was not injured. Is there anything that we can do for that?
Stay undercover.
That's right.
Well, with the with the increase in the weather and the rain, everything, certainly it's something you got to be aware of is hydroplaning.
Yes.
Leaving enough stopping distance ahead of you and watching out for the person behind you, because you can be a safe driver, but it's that other person on the road that's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And so definitely, just leave extra stopping distance, because what happens. One of the things that causes chain reactions. Someone suddenly stops in front of you, and then you slam on your brakes, and then the person behind you is following too closely. So if everybody can just leave, a couple extra seconds between each of you, it help a lot. Because that's one of the things that I do promote is, yes, I'm here after the fact to help people who have been injured and been in crashes, but one of the things that I always promote too is public safety, public awareness, and prevention. So that's one of the purposes of our civil justice system, is for education and to help prevent injuries. Not just after the fact, but to help educate the public.
Yeah, the greatest way to win a battle is never to engage at all, right?
There you go.
That's true.
So is it always my fault if I hit somebody from behind?
Well, 90% of the time it probably would be.
Yes.
Oftentimes what happens, just I was talking about, usually someone's following too closely and not leaving enough stopping distance. And it kind of depends on circumstances. Let's say that you're going across the bridge and there's stop and go traffic. People are stopping and going constantly. And then then you follow somebody too closely and you hit them, and then you want to say, oh no, they just suddenly stopped in front of me. I hear insurance companies say that a lot. Well, but if you know that traffic is stop and go and like that, then you do have an obligation or a duty to be aware of that and leave enough distance, because you should be anticipating what's happening ahead of you. Versus, let's say you're going down the highway or down a country road or wherever, where there is no reason to anticipate that, and for whatever unexpected reason, somebody in front of you, they drop a cigarette in their lap, or they're reaching out for their cell phone and they just suddenly slam on their brakes with no warning, and you hit them. That could be what's called a sudden emergency, where they created that situation and you hit them. So in that situation, by hitting them, it may not be your fault. It may be their fault for suddenly stopping.
There you go.
So, but that's the exception. But usually, if you're hitting them in the rear, if they're at a stop sign or a stoplight or bridge traffic, it's going to be your fault.
Good to know, Carl. All right, we have a mailbag that sort of pertains to this, but it's talking about insurance, full coverage, that kind of thing. Eric from Louisville says, I heard you mention recently there's no such thing as full coverage with car insurance.
Aha.
Can you explain that more? If that's true, am I wasting my money on an expensive car insurance plan?
Wow, that was our last conversation, right?
Well, and that's a great question. And no, I'm not suggesting that you're wasting money on car insurance. What my point is that clients come in all the time, and I'll ask them about what coverage they have, and they always say, well, I have full coverage. Well, but my point is that I don't know what that means. I have to look at your insurance policy, and you should look at what's called a declarations page, which outlines what your coverage is. There's different types of coverage, whether it is to protect you if you hit somebody else, or to protect yourself if somebody hits you, or payment of medical bills. So the term full coverage doesn't really tell me what coverage you have. But certainly you want to have enough coverage, but you've got to look at the actual coverage and not just shop for insurance based on price. And and maybe a lot of insurance companies actually may be surprised to hear me say that, but don't just shop based on price. You got to look at what coverage you actually have and compare specifics of the coverage and not just rely on the term full coverage.
Good to know.
Don't be alarmed by the sounds you're hearing. There's a dog in the studio. And speaking of, if a dog on my property bites someone who has walked on my property in defense of the property, am I liable as a dog owner?
Well, there's different types of duties owed to different people on your property. You know, and we've talked about this once before, where you could be what's called a trespasser, or you could be what's called a social invitee, or a business invitee. And each level of person you owe a different duty to. So, for example, let's say you own a business, and someone comes on your property. You owe a much higher standard of care, a much higher duty or obligation to them because they're there for business purposes than if they just come over to your house for a picnic, or if they're not invited at all and they come across your property, then your obligation to them is much less. So, to answer that specific question, I mean, it kind of depends on different factors, but but generally speaking, I mean, if they are a trespasser, then you don't have as much obligation to them as if they were invited over.
Good answer. And you can find out more at trumanlaw.com or call the number on your screen for more from Karl Truman. He'll be back next Tuesday, so call us, email us with your questions. He'd love to answer them.
That's right.
Thank you for being with us, Karl.
Thank you.
Offices in both Kentucky and Indiana. We'll be right back with more Louisville Live.